Testing, testing. Just checking sound. Hello. Hello. Hello.
Testing, testing. Checking sound. Hello.
All right, guys. Welcome back. Good morning. Good morning, wherever you're watching. Checking our new sound and voice meter here, but welcome back to the channel. This is chapter 1 of our brand new book, Bedros Keulian's Man Up. And what a great introduction we've had. Past couple videos we recorded just covering the intro, and it really did set the stage on some of the failure. Today we're going to chapter 1. Chapter 1 is covering his entry into the United States. It's called section 1 he calls it leading yourself. Chapter 1 is wisdom from an unemployed dropout, and this guy drops some bombs, some nuggets here, and excited to share this chapter with you guys today. So let's get into it. So starting off, he just talked about where everything got started and why he started to write this book, and shared about his heart attack. And I'm finding myself relating to him in many different ways here in this first chapter, and awesome stuff. So some of this you can hear from a couple of interviews that he does. He talks about some of these stories, but he goes more into detail here in his book. And this one, what a story. It's kind of cool too, because you're gonna, we're in LA, or LA County, and he shares a lot of, we're right at the border of Orange County, and I spent some years living in Huntington Beach, and he kind of shares some of the story of, well, he shares about some of the cities where he's lived, he grew up, and where he went to school, where he went to college, and it was all around this area. I did not know that about him, and so I'm liking it even more. All right, so like and share, you guys, like and subscribe. Again, this is the Big Money Medi channel. This is a book club channel, motivation channel. Also, going to cover a lot of truth. There's a lot of things that we're going to be doing here on this channel. Just want to throw up there. We can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, and again, the name of our book by Bedros Keulian is Man Up. Free copies available from his website. Section 1, leading yourself. All right, so right off, he starts off with saying, covering leadership. He says, leader isn't a title. Leadership is one of my favorite subjects to read upon, to hear about, from John Maxwell to um, Miles Monroe, and a couple others, but those are my two big ones. And so I'm interested to see what Bedros Keulian has to say about leadership. Definitely something that I feel is a very important asset if you're leading, if you're running a church, if you're running a business, any sort of organization. Leadership is huge. Leadership um, will drive your business up. You can also drive it down to the ground. And today he's going to cover a couple examples of leadership and where he stands on it. Right off the bat, saying leadership isn't a title, not a nameplate or a set of words. It's definitely not your LinkedIn profile. He says leadership isn't a what, it's a how, right? Huge, right? It's not a what, it's a how you do things. It says leadership is being a visionary, a clear communicator, it's being decisive, staying in control of your emotions, which is a big thing that I find, that people are lacking in inside leadership, the lack of control over emotions. He says, it's leading your organization from the front to victory with the least amount of stress, chaos, and lost revenue, and is the shortest and doing it in the shortest time possible. Right? Huge. So again, very cool definition on leadership. You hear bits and pieces of it, but I like the way he puts it. It's being in control of your emotions, being decisive, a communicator, visionary, And leading from the front, which we hear a lot in our business, um, and doing it with the least amount of stress, chaos, lost revenue, and doing it in the shortest time possible. It says it's easy to prefer titles over outcomes, um, and that's a huge thing. So yes, uh, he says yes, you might be the founder, the boss, or the CEO, but does that make you a leader? And he says not if your business is falling apart or getting pummeled by the competition. He says not if your personal life relationships um, with those who matter and your health are a train wreck. So if your personal relationships, relationships with people who matter in your life, and your health is a train wreck, you cannot be the leader. Uh, Not if you feel like there's a vice grip around your neck every single day. It's time to step into real leadership, the kind that builds empires, right? Leads high performance teams and turns ideas into industry game changers. And he says in this section, you're going to hear about, you're going to discover what it takes to lead your business to the fullest potential, and more importantly, how to become the effective leader that your business and your employees so badly need. That's huge. So, starting off with the definition of leadership and the attributes of a leader, right? So, chapter one is wisdom from an unemployable dropout, right? Um, so, in this chapter, starts off saying that there was a time when he wasn't qualified to write this book. And I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to read everything word for word because that should be your job. Today we're going to do a book club. This is for people who are reading along, who have read the book, or who are interested in the book. We're going to cover just a few parts highlights of every chapter. We'll cover the whole book, but we're going to do highlights of the chapter, things I feel are worthy to be shared, things I feel that are worthy to be discussed. All right. So chapter one is wisdom from an unemployed dropout. He says here, now this is the history of Bedros Keulian, how he came to the country. Again, he shared some of this in his various interviews online on YouTube. He says there was a time where he was not qualified to write this book. After all, he is a foreigner from a communist country. He says, fun fact, my father was actually a member of a communist party. I was born in Armenia. He says he could have been assigned to work at a grocery store or a cab clerk or a car mechanic somewhere in Armenia, and they escaped the communist Soviet Union in June of 1980. He says his father bribed a Soviet government official with 25,000 rubles. I don't know how much that is in American money, which had taken him more than 5 years to save up. So it just sounds like a lot. 5 years of your savings, and he was able to move his family out, or actually escape out of the communist Soviet Union. He said so. It was his father, Krikor, who was age 46, mother Susie, who was age 42, his sister Julie, who was age 22, brother Sarkis, age 20, and himself, the 6 year old baby of the family, escaped to Italy. Once they were there, they went to the American consulate, declared themselves as anti communist political refugees, and asked for permission to come to the United States. And they were granted that permission. His dad came here with his family. They had $184 for a family of five, and they were only allowed to bring two suitcases. So they arrived to the United States in New York. So they landed JFK Airport June 15, 1980, landing at, again, JFK Airport. And he says he remembers thinking that the whole airport was a city. So you imagine, young kid, 6 years old, coming from a communist country and coming to the United States, and out of all places, the Big Apple. He says that the he thought the airport was the city. It was bigger and crazier swarm. It was a bigger and crazier swarm of people than he had ever seen in the villages back home. When he had nowhere to, they said they didn't have anywhere to go, nowhere to stay that night, so they spent the night at the airport. His dad hadn't slept for 5 days, but he still stayed up that night to watch over his family and all their things as they slept at the airport. The next day, they flew into California, landed at LAX, and his dad already had a friend lined up Well, he said a friend of a friend in Southern California who agreed to pick them up and take them to Cyprus. Right, so a friend of a friend came and picked them up and took them home to his own home in Cyprus, where they shared a one bed. Well, they shared the gentleman's apartment, and in that apartment, Bedros Keulian and his family were given one of the bedrooms, and they all shared that bedroom. He said the family sat in the back of a van of his van and looked out of the window, and all they could see were lights and cars and wide roads. We were dumbfounded and in awe. What a feeling! And that was seeing it in the dark. So he didn't really even get a good view of what it would look like. And now they're in here, L.A. County, and he said that they're looking at everything out the window and just were in awe. It reminds me of uh, a family. When I was young, my dad would go to work and my mom would um, take us to the practices that we had at church. We were at church almost every day, practice, Bible study, youth, and all that stuff. And there was families that were just starting off here in the United States and here from Samoa, and we would pick them up in our van and take them to the church for practice. And I remember one of the kids in the very, very back. He wasn't even in the middle row or the back row. He was behind the back row by the back door, just crying out to all the Christmas lights. Calling, saying in Samoan, Moli, like calling out all the lights, right? And just very excited about all the lights of the city. I can imagine how he was feeling as a 6-year-old boy, looking out the van and all these lights in there. He says we were just seeing it in the dark. It was a 45-minute drive to Cyprus, and even in that short time, we knew it was a big country, certainly bigger than what we had come from. So they stayed in the spare room with his man's apartment. All five of them lived in that one room for a month. He says the morning after. Now this is amazing to me because it seemed like the dad, his father, Bedros Keulian's father, had planned this very well. To escape from the communist Soviet Union, get into Italy, get uh, approval to come to the United States. Next day they're flying into New York. Next day they're flying into LA, and here they are in Cyprus. And the very next day after leaving, here just right. So he says the friend of a friend or his quote unquote. All five of them lived in his bedroom. And the morning after they arrived, the uncle already had lined up a paper delivery route for his dad that paid him $10 a night. So at 2 a.m., my dad would leave us, get in the same van, and start throwing papers onto front steps. On the third day, he got a second job. It's amazing. As an attendant at a gas station. By the end of the week, he got a third job as a dishwasher at a pizzeria. Um, the following week, his brother got a job at a gas station where his dad worked. And one of the scariest moments during a difficult time, he says his brother was robbed at gunpoint, came home in shock, which sucks to hear. I don't know where in Orange County this was, but somewhere near Cyprus. A couple of weeks later, probably Anaheim. A couple of weeks later, someone else tried to rob his brother again at gunpoint. Already two instances with this kind of similar situation. It sucks to hear. Because my brother, for some reason, I'll never understand, tried to grab the gun. The guy shot a few rounds that barely missed my brother, and a near death experience that would stay with him his whole life. Man, be very traumatizing. And he says, welcome to America. And his sister started washing dishes at the pizzeria where their dad worked. Came home one night and was upset, saying that she told her dad how the restaurant owner would take a sip out of her cup. This is unbelievable, right here, guys. He would take a sip out of her cup to make sure she wasn't stealing Sprite, to make sure that this clear liquid was water, and he did this every day because he wanted to make sure she wasn't stealing. Needless to say, she was grossed out about that guy. She and she was paid less than minimum wage, and she was paid under the table. She couldn't say a thing to him because they needed the money, and she had no other choice. Sucks. He says, I remember when I overheard that my sister was unhappy about her job, I promised myself that one day I'd make so much money that she'd never have to work for someone else like that again. It says, today she works for me from home on a laptop doing customer support. That's awesome. So he manifested that. I was 6 years old, but I can remember that times were rough. We were broke. We didn't speak the language, we didn't understand the culture, and didn't know how we were going to make it. My brother and sister would come home crying every single day because they didn't belong. They missed their friends, and they wanted to go back to Armenia. We were yelled at and harassed on a regular basis. Now, this part right here, this is, it sucks that people have to go through this. Um, I don't know if it's that bad today. I wouldn't agree. So, but definitely back then, probably, there was a lot more animosity towards foreigners. He says that we were yelled at and harassed on a regular basis, called every bad name in the book, and told, go back to your own fucking country, you fucking foreigner. That was how I learned the F word. My father wondered if he had made the right decision for his family. He had a sense that things would get better. He knew that we were in a wonderful country that offered us freedom and the opportunity to make something of ourselves, but first we had to overcome being poor and foreign. Sometimes you can take a look at someone's later success and assume that they had a cushy life or an easy journey. But he says, but let me be clear. Sorry, guys. But let me be clear. I've eaten out of dumpsters because at times we had no money for food. Just let me be clear. I've eaten out of dumpsters because at times we had no money for food. I've worn clothes we found in the trash that were more than a generation old and a couple sizes too small. All right, sorry guys. I had to keep doing a sound check to make sure this is good because we're trying something different here. So he had to eat out of dumpsters because he had no money for food, and he had to wear clothes that they found in the trash that were more than a generation old and a couple sizes too small. He says there was a time where he got lice and they couldn't afford the lice medicine, so they had to wash his hair with gasoline. All right. He says wherever the bottom is, just go a few feet deeper, and that's where my family had started. Man, so just sharing, coming from a different country to the United States, I can only imagine how difficult that could be, especially when you don't speak the language, you don't understand the culture. I don't have that experience, but definitely up there with the difficulty. Right? He says now he's going to get into the school, which I find it hard enough being an American and growing up speaking English. Well, actually, I can relate to him on this part too because even though I was born and raised here, I struggled with English. Samoan was actually my real first language. Um, before I got into kindergarten, I spoke and responded mainly to Samoan. Even though today I couldn't speak a lick, but according to what my family tells me, my parents told me, my kindergarten teacher struggled with me, and I struggled learning because English was not my first language. Right, so it says here, I like some of the things he says here. Sometimes you can take a look at someone's later success and assume that they had a cushy life or an easy journey. It's so true. You know what I mean? A lot of times we look at people who are successful and we don't judge them automatically in our mind. We don't think about the hardships that they've had to endure in this journey as they, find success here in the United States. And so let's get into the next part where he talks about school. He says, I never did well in school. I entered the public school system, and a few short months after landing in, just a few short months after landing in America, starting my school career before I even learned a lick of English. Right? He says he remembers pissing in his pants because he didn't know how to communicate to his teacher and tell his teacher that he needed to go to the restroom. Um, and if being the weird foreign kid wasn't hard enough, it says now the kids had another reason to pick on him. School was pure torture. He says it was hell. I started taking matters into my own hands. I ran away from the classroom. I'd escaped the he says he escaped all right apartment where his family was staying. Okay, he escaped the classroom and he would start to run back to his apartment. The school would call his mom, who would start running towards the school, right? And the principal would leave the school and run towards their apartment, and they would catch up with him halfway. Right, so they would have a standoff, and the mom dragged him back to school. And he said he would try to find a better way to do it the next time. And so he says one day he found himself again trapped between his mother and a worried principal, and he found a piece of a broken bottle on the sidewalk, and he picked it up and put it up against his arm, and he says that if you take another step, I'm going to cut myself. Right. So he said he became a suicidal, 6-year-old. But what happened was his mother tackled him down, and he dropped the glass, and they had to find a different way. So, he says it was his way of dealing with being the new kid from a foreign country and not being able to communicate or relate to the other kids. After the incident with the broken beer bottle, the school found an Armenian translator to sit beside him in class, more bearable, though it didn't improve beyond that. I could relate because when my kindergarten teacher struggled with communicating with me, we had my cousin. Who's that? Oh yeah, we had a girl who lived who was my next door neighbor. Actually, went to church with us, my same age as me. We put her in my class, so so the teacher can talk to her, and she could relay the information onto me if I didn't understand anything. All right, so here, here we had an Armenian translator come in to help him out, to interpret, to interpret anything that he didn't understand. So it says it improved. It was better that way. It was more bearable, but it didn't improve beyond that. He says always a bad associate. He always had a bad association with anything else school related. He says even today, a simple ad for a back to school supplies. Okay, I can relate to this. So he says even today, because of the bad association that he had with school, even today when he sees an advertisement for back to school supplies, right? So we're talking like August, right? They start advertising school supplies and getting the kids ready to get back into school. He says it gives him a stomach ache when he sees them and a mild sense of anxiety, because part of that was that school was for him a source of instability. And I can relate to that. I mean, I can't pinpoint exactly why I feel the way I do, but when it's afternoon and like the sun's getting low, I started getting really anxious about things. I started to feel like uh, this sense of loneliness, abandonment. I'm speaking to you on a personal level and being, trying to be transparent with you. But this is something that I feel, and the only one who knows this is my wife, who I share everything with. But I get this weird feeling. It's so weird because when the sun sets, California, man, so especially Southern California, you get the most beautiful sunsets. I love sunsets, and one of my dreams is to build a restaurant where we can catch every, a good view of every sunset every day. But there's something about the afternoon where I start to feel anxiety, and it ties into memories that I have from middle school, being having to stay behind for um, what you call that, that disciplinary what do you call that, detention, right? When you got to stay after for detention, I get this weird feeling now every time the sun sets. I feel like I'm in an empty campus. All the kids are gone. It's so weird. I get this weird feeling about it. But yeah, anything that's related to, and I mean, you can have, I guess it could relate to someone who has PTSD or something like that, right? Post traumatic stress syndrome. Um, I heard what he said, what he's saying here about just a simple back to school ad gives him a stomach ache and a bad, mild sense of anxiety. It's so crazy. Something small like that can really affect you today. and the emotions just carry throughout the years. Anyway, moving on, he says they moved around so much in the 80s. He never had really a lot of time to, to go to these schools. He went to three different elementary schools, two middle schools, and two high schools. His grades were awful. The administration teachers they didn't want to deal with him. They kept passing him along to the next grade because they didn't want to deal with him just to get him out of their hair. But he said one high school teacher did try to talk sense into him. Her name was Miss Boyd. That name haunts me because we had a couple Miss Boyds in school growing up, and I didn't like either one of them. His 11th grade science teacher. He says by that point he had all had but given up on high school. Well, he had given up on high school. So rather than paying attention in class, he'd sit by the door and try to gain attention of people sitting out there in the quad, anybody who was in the earshot of his voice. But he said Miss Boyd wouldn't have it. She stormed up on him, yell at him, stand him up, grab his shirt collar, and bang him against the wall. That's funny. With each word that came out of her mouth, you need to go to the military. They're the only ones who can set you straight. He said, in all her anger, he doesn't think that she realized that there was a fire extinguisher hanging on the wall right behind his head. Or maybe she did. After school, he went to the Marine Corps recruiter station in Anaheim, California, and they said that he had flat feet. He couldn't join the military. So a year after high school, he went to Fullerton Community College or junior college. He hated every minute of it and dropped out only 31 days of college. Just like the other schools before it, he felt lost, confused, and out of place. I would agree. I loved high school. The college sucked. Didn't like it. Never even read books back then. If you told me I'd be writing one someday, I'd laugh at you. That's awesome. So here he is, an established author, sharing his success through his writings. I hope to be doing the same. I have a goal to write a book. Now that I'm getting into reading a lot more. Oh, by the way, it says ordinary people have big TVs on my backdrop here, but extraordinary people have big libraries. There's something about reading, guys, if you want to find success. Now, moving on to the next subject of this chapter 1, he says from failing at a business to working at Disneyland. By the way, chapter 1 is broken into a few sections, but we're just going to finish this one section here, and we'll start off tomorrow with the other sections to finish off chapter 1. It looks like there's 15 chapters in this book, and we're going to try to get through them as fast as possible, but we are going to break down these chapters. So we're looking at about a month to read this book, maybe more. It says from the name of this section here, first section we're going to cover in chapter 1, or section off section in chapter 1. It says from failing at a business to working at Disneyland. It wasn't just school. As proud, let me see. Chapter 1, from failing. Here you go. From failing at business to working at Disneyland. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's what we said. It wasn't just school. As proud as I am, business owner, of my business success today, I failed in my first two attempts in business ventures. Oh, there's a big nugget right there. See, a lot of people look at people that are in business and still trying to make it and say, why not just give up and go back to a job? Yeah, I'm one of those who left a job, right? And let me just tell you, I can't go back to a job. There's no way that's going to happen. And a lot of people will say, well, what are you going to do? I mean, it's not working out. It's not working out. And I said, look, my mentality is very simple. It takes time, and it takes more time, and it takes more time until we get the job done. And for anybody who's business minded, I see a lot of people that bounce from business to business. Hey, if it doesn't work out, keep going. Find something else that will work. But a business is the way to go. Definitely, you don't want to. Job is good for experience. Job is good for just putting something on your resume. But learn from it and move on. Hopefully, you find out what I found out and what Bedros Keulian is about to find out here in this chapter. It says here, it wasn't just school. As proud as he is as a business owner today, a successful business owner, he failed at his first two business ventures. Never afraid of hard work. His first job was at the age of 13 at a local mom and pop grocery store. He emptied boxes and produce from their truck, and he rotated produce in the walk-in fridge, stocked shelves. In high school, he had a job at a bagel cafe, and he used all the money that he had earned from these two jobs to start a business. I guess you could say that I started young. My first business was was a DJ business at the age of 18. I'm sorry. The first job was the grocery store. But the first business was at the age of 18, and he took the money that he saved up and started this DJ business. He bought two very expensive turntables, a mixer, some speakers, and an amp. Right, so old school. This is before the laptop, right? Just putting it all on the laptop. He was really mixing some stuff. He got the amp. He said he loved high school. He loved hip hop and dance music, and he figured he could make some money as a DJ. Let's just say that the business failed. The only event he had ever DJ'd, he did it for free. But hey, failure is a good thing. I mean, that's how you figure your way out. I also worked as a personal trainer. He wasn't so much of a success, but he did train a handful of clients, and he really did enjoy it. In the beginning, he had no idea how to make um, personal training a business success. A personal training business successful. He had the right instincts about business, but he had no way. He had no way to turn these instincts into results. So a good example, he said 1997. Um, the internet was just coming around at this time, and websites that sold things were popping up left and right. I thought the internet was a great place to start my business, so I launched my site called TotalMuscle.com, an online supplement store, very common to see today. And he found out where local stores would get their supplements from. So he went and bought his own supplements at wholesale cost. He spent $55,000 that he had saved up from his personal training gig, and by charging up his credit card. Now he says that he stored all of this in his apartment, and he figured that he would get low overhead with the wholesale price, and his hard work to lead would lead him to riches. And he hustled, and he says this, like, he says, I sent out, for those of you that that aren't finding success, you got to know that you have to run the numbers. He says, I sent out 200 or 300 emails late into the night every night to prospective buyers. 200 to 300 emails. So, you know, apply that as you will to your business. You got to increase the effort to find the results. Yeah, but he said not enough people were buying from him to move the product fast enough. So what happened was with his product, this doesn't apply to everybody here because it's a perishable. He said his products expired because he couldn't move it fast enough. So the 55,000 that he had spent, he said it evaporated, and he maxed out his credit card, and he used his rent money to continue to pay for the business. So what happened was he got kicked out of his apartment. He said, I needed to eat, so I ate what was left of my protein powder and protein bars. It's pretty crazy, right? It sure beat eating out of the dumpsters again. But I was constipated and sick all the time. It was funny because when I was reading this, I was like, I wonder if that affects his health somehow. He says, but he was constipated and sick all the time from eating all of the protein products that he didn't want to toss out. This was the beginning. This is the beginning of my entrepreneurial career: catastrophic failure and constipation. I thought that was funny. But it's always good to fail, and then later on you get to look back and like, man, what a an idiot, what a bonehead I was to do all that. All right, so he says that this was a dark time. He was failing at school, failing at business, and he was working at a big box gym as a personal trainer. And he says anybody that has worked for a big box gym knows that the pay is not great, right? So he had to get a side hustle as a bouncer at a gay bar. Again, I can relate to you, Bedros. I can relate because I too was a bouncer at many clubs, many bars, many many events, like what do you call those event halls? Anyway, I worked security in a lot of different fields, and yeah, one of them was a gay bar. Well, it was a club that had certain days that it was a gay bar. But yeah, you get to see some different experience. Different experience. Anyway, he said he was a bouncer on the side at a gay bar, and he said the gay bar paid more because the straight bars that he paid more than the straight bars because skinheads would try to come into the bar and a couple times a week and just a gay bash. He says it was our job as bouncers to make sure that the skinheads never made it into the bar. I suppose the extra money was considered hazard pay. That's crazy. That's a crazy thing. But yeah, um, you see all kinds of things at the bars and clubs. But even with an extra pay, even with the extra pay from the gay bar and the income from personal training, I still wasn't making ends meet. So I took a third job at Disneyland. Right? I've had 3 jobs before. That it's not fun. Definitely not fun. All right. So he says, let's see, so 200, I think. Okay. So he took a third job at Disneyland. He worked as a busboy at the Carnation Cafe on Main Street, USA, in Disneyland. All right. He says here, I think everyone should work as a table busser at one point in their lives. Here's what a busboy did. Okay, so they cleared tables, they washed dishes, glasses, pots, and pans, mop floors, deep cleaned the kitchen every night after the park was closed till 2 in the morning. Every busboy hated the job. It was physically exhausting, and they always smelled the food. I know how that is. I worked at a restaurant, and you get that oil just stuck on your clothes. And you get zero respect from the rest of the restaurant staff who look down on busboys. But I paid my dues, and before long, I was asked to unpack pallets of food that were delivered every morning. This was just as exhausting as bussing tables, but I got to work normal hours and no longer smelling of ketchup, mustard, and greasy hamburgers at 2 o'clock in the morning. All right, so he came up. Then I was asked to become a fry cook and then eventually a dinner cook. And after 5 years, I was trained as a chef and got to wear the chef whites and the fancy chef hat. That's awesome. So he became a chef. All right. And he says, by the way, fun fact about the folds in the chef hat. I didn't know this, but he says there are 100 of them, and they all signify the 100 ways of preparing an egg. Who knew you could make an egg 100 different ways? That is ridiculous. Anyway, definitely a fun fact. I learned a lot from my time at working at Disneyland, but the best lesson of all was seeing firsthand the difference between a great leader who was respected by the team and one who was mediocre and earned no respect. Now he goes into this great example. He's going to paint the picture right here. This was a lesson that would be central to my success in the future. Right. And he says here the lesson of poor leadership came in the form of a sour faced manager. Let's call her Kathy. I bet anything that's her real name. One of one of the two shift managers all of the who oversaw sorry, one of the two shift managers who oversaw all of the Main Street restaurants. Kathy had to make sure that the kitchen would maintain standards and met a laundry list of rules and regulations set forth by the health department at Disney. Kathy would drop in randomly, usually at the busiest times in the kitchen, just to stick thermometers in the meats, inspect the ice trays, and look for any aspect of the kitchen that wasn't up to code. Yes, her job was very important, but no one particularly liked the intrusion or the way she would disregard the kitchen staff during the busiest of times without ever giving a word of encouragement. That's a no-no. Kathy was one of those managers who just didn't give praise, validation, or approval. It appeared that she only cared to point out shortcomings and mistakes we made. See, that this you couldn't marry somebody like that either, right? Add that to her pessimistic attitude. That's just ugly. Passive aggressive way of communicating and a skeptic demeanor, and you've got someone who simply rubbed everyone the wrong way. He said, he says, one day while manning the hot grill, I felt a pencil. Oh man, this I felt a pencil pressed up against the side of my face. I was like, "What is a pencil?" Right, and just under the left sideburn. Right, and it was Kathy. She noticed that my sideburns were a smidge below my earlobe, thus breaking the Disney dress code for facial hair. Damn, that sucks. I've had one person tell me I gotta shave my beard, um, and I told them it was against my religion. They shut up about it. I had another person who told me um, to shave my beard and grow my hair because I looked like a pirate, and I listened at that time because I respected that person. Um, and I had another person, tell me, another manager tell me about that my hair was getting too long. That's when I was growing my hair out the first time. And I grew it on anyway, because I didn't respect that manager. So it's anyway. Um, wow, Disney had facial hair restrictions, right? So he says uh, he broke the dress code of facial hair at Disney. So Kathy insisted that I immediately resolve this issue by making a trek to the employee locker room and find a razor to trim my sideburns up a quarter of an inch. Wow. So she made him leave to go and cut his hair. Never mind that no guest would ever see my sideburns back at the grill in the kitchen. Very true. Never mind that it was our busiest hour at the restaurant with swarms of people in right before a parade was scheduled to go down Main Street. So we're talking about the old electric parade that would go down Main Street in Disneyland. Never mind the fact that that very same parade would trap me on the other side of Main Street, keeping me away from the kitchen for a full 40 minutes. The rest of the kitchen staff suffered without my help during that busy hour because Kathy had prioritized the length of my sideburns over the service and efficiency of the kitchen during the critical time. It says here and this is huge. I highlighted that she failed to see the big picture. How many managers fail to see the big picture, and so they become, they start making some bad decisions. It happens in leadership all across the globe, all across the spectrum. When a leader fails to see the big picture, they make stupid mistakes, which was to keep the kitchen efficient and to deliver the Disney magic to the guests. Because of this, morale suffered, and this is exactly what happens. Morale suffered, and she lost the respect of her team. There's a lot of leadership in my life that I've lost respect for because they couldn't communicate right. They couldn't keep their emotions under control. They couldn't see the big picture. They didn't have the vision of a leader, and therefore, I lose respect for the leaders. Again, if we do have those things, you know, I really do respect leadership that is good, leadership that is great, that is efficient, and that has mastered those aspects. But because of this, the morale suffered and she lost the respect of her team. The whole incident really bothered me. Sure, I was absolutely at fault for violating the Disney grooming standards. I deserved to be written up and even docked pay while I shaved back my sideburns. But all of that could have happened after the parade passed and at the restaurant and the restaurant went from chaos to manageable. Kathy's counterpart, now this is the good manager. Kathy's counterpart, the other shift manager, let's call him Doug. I bet Doug is his real name too. He was a very tall, very heavy set man and in his late 40s with a slight southern accent. Everyone seemed to adore Doug. It says everyone seemed to adore Doug. During those busy times in the restaurant, Doug would come into the kitchen and flip his tie over his shoulder and say, "What can I help with, boys?" No mistake about it, Doug was firm. He did his job well and maintained the restaurant and its staff to high standards. But was quick to give you the pat on the back for a job well done. One thing I noticed about Doug was that he held the staff and restaurant to higher standards than even Kathy did. But he says, but everyone seemed to want to work harder for Doug. We didn't want to disappoint him. When Doug was our shift manager, in the restaurant was packed. We'd skip our break in order to keep the kitchen efficient and the magic alive for the restaurant's guests. Isn't that awesome? See what good leadership does. Good leadership will cause the team to pull for the good of the restaurant, for the good of the unit or the company, right? We knew that when things got hectic in the kitchen, Doug would jump into whatever position was needed and work alongside the kitchen staff, servers, and bussers. And he did it all with enthusiasm. That's one thing that, one of the things that I learned from my coach. Success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. All right. So he stayed excited, right? He stayed on top of his game. That was the first experience with great leadership. He says, this is Bedros saying, that was my first experience with great leadership. In a way, however, I have to thank Kathy for showing me what a poor and inefficient leader look like. So in my business, we talk about it all the time. Are you the example or are you the warning? That's exactly the same thing we're talking about here. All right. So he says, from that experience, I realized that I was never meant to be an employee. And this is, again, another point where I can relate because I did have that moments of awakening where I realized, man, the job is just not for me. I'm not built for a job. I'm built to do something different. He says, from that experience, I realized that I was never meant to be an employee. I learned that I wasn't made to take illogical orders from a leader whom I didn't respect. I could deal with it only as long as I needed to, and then I had to find another way. There was one other thing I learned while working at Disneyland. It's called workflow, right? So workflow, he says, I recall first getting into the flow, right? The flow during the 2 hours before and after the Main Street Electrical Parade, which made the Carnation Cafe literally the busiest restaurant in the entire country on any given night. Tens of thousands of people would line up mainly just to watch the parade, and hundreds of them would line up at the restaurant to come and eat in our outdoor dining area and watch the parade. When I was a busboy, we had to swoop in and clean off the tables and take everything back and wash them, and then bust the plates, glasses, and silverware from the counter, and wash the pots and pans from the kitchen crew to use just to make things more fun. I decided to turn it into a challenge in my head. This is something I would do too at work. All right, he said that he'd race to see how many tables he could clear with one bus tub, how fast I could mop the kitchen floors, how high I could stack the rack of glasses and carry them out to the soda fountain. I'd pile glasses into one another and make a stack of 10 or 12 of them in my tub to save room. I figured out a way to hold the bus tub above my shoulders with one hand so that I could wipe tables down with the other hand without having to go back to the kitchen to put the tub down. I was almost I was the most efficient busboy in human history, and in time, I found myself actually enjoying this whole thing. By the time my break and lunch passed and my shift ended, I didn't know where the time had gone. Back then, I had no idea that this was called, or that I was in the flow, or what it meant. That I just turned an otherwise stressful and low paying job into a game, and I loved it. That's awesome. Because on the surface, you wouldn't think that there was a kind of job anyone could love. The service would chew you out. On the surface, you wouldn't think that this was the kind of job anyone would love. The servers would chew you out if a group left their table and you weren't swooping in like a hawk to bust the table so that they could see the new family and earn more tips. The kitchen crew kept the stress on us too. The cooks in the kitchen constantly yelled at the busboys to bring them clean plates, pots, and pans. No matter how fast you work, you couldn't keep the cooks you couldn't satisfy the cooks, and they made it known. And this is something I was I was asking the question, and as I read this, I was like, I wonder if he did the same thing too while he was the chef. And as a side note, when I got promoted into the kitchen, I too gave the busboys a hard time, and I rode them relentlessly, and uh, and it was a rite of passage, and we all loved the process. He says, when you turn something unpleasant into a game, you'd be surprised how far it can take you. Even though I was being yelled at, and my body was exhausted, my clothes were a mess, and my hair reeked of food, I felt every day was a challenge, and I enjoyed that. I wanted to beat the total number of tables that I could bust in an hour, or I wanted to do it faster, or I wanted to find a way to cut some step out of the process and make my job more efficient. I didn't know about the science of flow then. I didn't know that research actually reveals that you can get into a state in which your mind and body are in unison and the hours just fly by. And I just knew I had to experience something amazing. I just knew I had experienced something amazing, and I wanted to experience it again. But only this time, I'd be the boss. All right, so awesome. So we're gonna finish off right there. And he was talking about the flow, and it instantly reminded me of when I used to work night audit at a hotel. And my mother worked there, my brother worked there, my sister worked there, my younger brother worked, all my brothers, my whole family worked there, except for my dad. And this place, I grew up there, and actually we lived in that hotel during high school. Um, I remember working night audit, and that's funny thing. That's where I met my wife. You know, thinking about it, just because I'm connected things. Because yesterday was our anniversary, um, and I remember preparing the breakfast. I would get the breakfast started before the first maids would come in at 4 o'clock in the morning. But I'd already have stuff ready and started. Um, Sometimes I get it all done, but you got to get the cheese cut, you got to get the eggs out. Get there was sausage and bacon, but I didn't have that in my time. Doing the pancake mix, all this stuff, putting out the breads. There's all these things that you had to do, because it was a full breakfast. We didn't have a chef. It was us. It was the front counter and the maids that did the breakfast, and so I had to get everything ready for them so that they could start serving and cleaning as people came and ate the breakfast. So I remember finding, if there was like 30 things I had to do to set up a full breakfast, I would find shortcuts and find steps and make things easier and get things done faster. And where it would have taken me 2.5 hours to fully prepare breakfast, I got it down to an hour. Then I got it down to 40 minutes, and I would get faster at it and get better at it by cutting out steps and getting to that flow as he's talking about here. And it says it's a state where your it's a state of mind where your body and your mind are in unison, right? Or a state where your body and mind are in unison. I think it's pretty cool. So we're gonna stop right there, and we're gonna, tomorrow we'll get to the next part of the first chapter, which is called Back to Business. So after 7 years working after working at Disneyland, and we'll see where the story goes from there. But what a great start! Just starting off with him and how he got to America with his family, his struggles in school, his failures in his first couple of businesses, and the lessons he learned from Disneyland. That's pretty awesome. I live right here by Anaheim Disneyland, and it's an awesome place to be. Even though, I have my thoughts about company and products and things like that, but um, what a great story that we're starting to get into here with Bedros Clinton in the early years of his life, and just the makings of who he is today. If we listen to him today, just such an awesome individual. And like I shared earlier in this video today, I relate to him on a few different subjects here that he's covered as a bouncer, failed business, failures in school and not fitting in, different language. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, thanks for sitting in with us, guys. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Share our videos and get it out there so we can get to reaching more people. I really want to get more people inspired to read. I have a lot of things that I got going on right now with business, with family, with my weight loss, getting healthy. and getting this channel up. I got a couple channels that I'm working: the Samoan Watchman and the Big Money Mini channel. The Big Money Mini channel is a book club and motivational club. I really do want to get you guys to reading, because there's something about reading a book, especially from someone who's as awesome as Bedros. Um, there's all kinds of great books out there where you can gain nuggets and things of value, things that you can implement into your lifestyle. Um, you know, why not improve yourself? Why not work on yourself? Your mind right here. This is what's going to help you make the best decisions possible in your life. Thinking is everything. So anyway, thanks for tuning in, guys. Love you all. Hope for the best for you guys. I pray you guys are doing well. Pray you guys are healthy and becoming wealthy and all of that. But thank you guys for sharing. We'll see you guys tomorrow night.